Welcome to AI in Action, Exploring Tomorrow's Tech Today, the podcast where we delve into the groundbreaking world of artificial intelligence. I'm Maurie, and with me is my husband, Jim. With our combined expertise in technology and education, we're here to guide you through the AI revolution. Whether it's the latest news headlines or transformative AI applications in classrooms, healthcare, and beyond, we're here to make sense of it all. Together, let's uncover how AI is reshaping our world from everyday encounters to the future of work. So let's dive in and explore tomorrow's tech today. Hello. So welcome to the podcast for Monday morning. It's episode 6, July 31st, 2023. I'm Maurie, and with me is my husband, Jim. We are going to talk about a very interesting topic for our AI in Action. Today, we are going to talk about the end of the world. So every time I say the end of the world, I always want to sing the song, "It's the end of the world as we know it." And of course, I'm not going to do that.
We're not going to be singing.
We're not going to be singing. The article that I thought was very interesting. And we're seeing all this stuff in the news about artificial intelligence and how it is going to humanity is done. The world is over as we know it. AI is going to destroy us. And we're going to get to that. But I wanted to bring up the very first article. It was in Time magazine, and it was published on March the 1st in 1976. And the title of the article was "What Hath Xerox Wrought?" And it's about copy machines. There were headline after headline after headline about copy machines that came out like in 1976, then go on to 1989. The Soviets free the dreaded photocopier, about how 40 years into it, and now they have it over in the Soviet Union, and they're having the same type of headlines that we had in the United States. It's going to change everything. The technological revolution is a threat to writers. It's going to be a privacy or a piracy threat because of photocopiers. Copy machines are going to be poison to writers. Copycats threat the U.S. to U.S. authors. So it's just like everyone was so worried about what copy machines were going to do to the world. And the headlines were so sensational and so
dramatic.
They wanted to get your attention. They wanted you to read that article. And that's what we're talking about tonight about artificial intelligence, is because the headlines are getting more and more extreme, I feel, because they want you to click or read that headline.
It's about perspective. It's funny because I remember 1976, and I was in the 5th grade, I think. And I don't remember anybody telling us, duck and cover because the photocopier is coming. It's one of those things where I think there's a lot of people now that they've heard about AI vaguely. They really don't know what it means. They remember Terminator, it's about it. And they don't know that much about it. So all this dramatic, like you said, they're being dramatic partly because they want people to click. Well, they're not getting their attention, and this is a great way to do it, is have dramatic headlines.
They are definitely attention hounds. So an article came out May the 18th of 2023. It was a survey, actually. It was a poll. And in the poll, it basically said that 61% of Americans believe that AI could threaten humanity.
Yeah. It's funny because I read the article, Routers, is that
Reuters?
Reuters, is that how you say that?
No idea.
And it was a poll that they did. And the funny thing about it is, I'm not sure that the people they ask actually knew why it was a threat. I think they're just kind of parroting what they've heard on the news. Well, it's AI, it's bad, it's got to be a threat. They never said why. They never said it's a threat because, or it's a threat to my particular way of life or whatever. It's just, it's a threat.
So that it's a perception. They're perceiving it as a threat. Now, what I thought was interesting was that there was like 17% of the people polled were still on the fence.
22% completely disagreed, 17% were unsure. So, percentage wise, there's a fair number of people who either A, disagree or just don't know anything about it. At least the 17% were willing to say, I'm unsure because I really probably don't even know what that is. I think that's probably the main thing you can get out of that is that people just didn't know.
Correct.
So, what's the next one?
The UN Security Council.
They, again, one of these very dramatic headlines about the UN Security Council is going to have their first ever meeting on threats of AI. I wonder if they had meetings for threats of photocopiers. Like, can the UN get
Maybe.
together and talk about, if they want to get together and talk about threats, it seems like there's a lot of other threats in the world they could be talking about other than AI, but it's hot, it's in the news, everybody likes to get the headlines. So, again, back to the dramatic, the UN chief is saying it's on par with the risk of nuclear war.
Only
Something,
if you give it the nuclear codes.
well, I mean, they're just trying to be dramatic about it. I don't know if they mean it literally or not, but it's funny because when they talk about it being on par with, I'm not in the UN, and maybe they've got access to information that I don't. I work for a school district. I'm in education, that kind of thing. But it's interesting that the UN chief uses such a dramatic comparison, considering that artificial intelligence has been around in ways that we know about. It's consumable by people for what, maybe a year or 2 years, maybe. So it went from I have no idea what that is to the status of nuclear war in 2 years. That's a pretty rapid rise.
Yes, it is. The next one is about how the OpenAI founders are warning AI super intelligence is like nuclear
There
power.
we go with that
Again,
nuclear
the
thing.
word nuclear, like we're going to blow ourselves up because of
Well,
AI.
you know, that article was released like in May seem to have been a good month for nuclear power, nuclear war kind of thing. Again, I'm not the guy running these open AI. I'm not the people running Microsoft or all this other stuff. But it's hard not to be cynical when they use these super intelligence, nuclear war, all that other stuff. I've used the tools. I'm not saying that I'm a AI expert in every sense of the word, but I've certainly using the tools a lot. And I just don't feel that level of threat that they do, which we're going to talk about more later about what that even means. But you have to wonder in your cynical way, is this an actual threat or is this just them wanting to placate the government and say, hey, don't worry guys, we're taking care of this, we understand how bad it can be, and oh, by the way, let's put up a nice big wall around it so nobody else can really play in our sandbox without it being so expensive. Anyway, I don't want to spend the whole time being cynical, but it sure is hard not to be in this particular case.
New nationwide program utilizing AI in schools will turn kids into robots.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I tried to, when you and I were talking about doing this, I tried to find a link to education. And it's interesting that they're turning kids into robots. I guess I have to wonder if these people have been in school for a while. If you want to look at a robot, wait till a new video game gets released and then walk in the library during some off period at the high school and watch how many kids are sitting there all staring at their screens playing some new video game that just came out. If anything is going to turn kids into a robot, I think it would be either social media or video games, but I don't hear them being compared to nuclear power and nuclear war. And, you know,
It's taking the attention of the kids
it certainly
more
is.
so than artificial intelligence.
We had a conversation. We had some people, some landscapers come out, and they had their little nephews and stuff with them
Third grade?
yesterday.
I think it was
Yeah,
in third grade.
yeah, I think you knew them pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, it was interesting because we were talking about technology and things like that because I've got a little
Well, it was really
workshop.
cool. You took him out and used your phone to take a picture
Did
of some eggs that he'd found on a leaf
it was on one of our pecan
and
trees.
used
Bard,
Bard to identify the eggs as to they
yes,
were caterpillar eggs. And he
yes,
thought that was really cool. So y'all started talking about AI and technology.
and of course he went immediately to video games and I said, well, I'm not really, I played games a long time ago, but I don't really play games now. I said, I don't really feel like I learn a lot from the games. He goes, oh, yeah, absolutely. You learn a lot. I said, really? What do you learn? He goes, oh, how to play the game better. I think, well, maybe that wasn't my point. Maybe my point was that there's a little more to, the great thing about artificial intelligence, I think, is that it allows you to learn things that are useful to me and that in my everyday life, because I use it in my everyday life. But anyway, I think that again, in the dramatic headline category, this seems like I don't really see AI turning all the kids into robots. I think they're referencing mostly to ChatGPT writing papers for people.
Probably. So, one of the other headlines that we were going to talk about is the risk and dangers of artificial intelligence. So, there's 8 risk and dangers
Now,
of
this was
artificial
on
intelligence.
a website builtin.com. I found this and I thought it was worth some discussion because at least they took the trouble. Most of them, they just have a dramatic headline. They don't really say much, like the survey, what exactly it is that the big danger is. These guys were very specific. So I thought it'd be interesting to go through them and talk about, again, we spend a lot of time teaching people about AI in education. My background is technology. I've spent a long time. I'm hoping that my age, and you're much younger age than mine, but my age allows me some perspective on how technology works or doesn't work or gets integrated in. Job losses due to automation.
That was that's number one
That's
risk.
number one.
Okay.
And I'm not going to argue. I think anytime a new technology comes on board, there's some kind of job losses. There's somebody that used to do something a particular way in technology. That's been happening since the invention of technology. But whether or not 85 million jobs, it's a very specific number. I'd love to know where exactly they came up with that number between 2020 and 2025. They talk a lot about the vulnerability of more of the blue collar workers. And I'm not sure that's the case. I mean, the people I read about that are using it the most are like me. They're in technology. It may be the white collar workers, the ones that are, information workers, IT, or people that write articles and
customer service.
Maybe it's a little bit of both in terms of white collar and not. I don't think it's exclusively blue collar. Technology tends to take the place because people think of automation. So it takes the place of blue collar workers. I just don't think that's the case.
Assembly line things.
Right, exactly.
I remember your dad talking about the very first automated welding machine.
Yes, my dad worked back in the 70s. He worked for a company called CRC on automatic welding machines. And the welders, the ones that actually were doing the hand welding, resented those machines because it was an automation thing. And they said, look, they asked him, I said, how would you feel what are you going to do if they make a machine that does what you do, which was work on the machines? He said, what are you going to do if they make a machine? Then they won't need you anymore. How are you going to feel? He said, well, I'm going to retrain myself and I'm going to work on the machine that works on the machines. I mean, his point is that I'm not going to stop the automation. I'm not going to stop the change. I'm just going to figure out how to adapt to it. And I think the job losses hopefully will get offset by the job creation that AI will bring into play.
Number 2, social manipulation through AI algorithms. Now, I have been on social media for quite some time. I've had a food blog and Instagram. And of course, now that I'm obsessed with AI, I'm not on as often as I used to be.
You're on LinkedIn. You're on LinkedIn a lot.
Well, with AI. But anyway, algorithms have been around a long time.
And they've been manipulating social manipulation. It's funny because they act like this is a new invention. This report's a little older. It's a 2018 report, but I hear this all the time about social manipulation using the AI. Why do you think that Facebook is one of the big contributors to all the new AI stuff? Why do you think Amazon has a group for AI? Google has a group for AI? Microsoft, each one of these people control, or these companies, entities, they control social media. How do you think they get scored in social media? How does it decide what articles to feed you, what ads to feed you? Well, that's based on, there's a background machine, call it machine learning, call it AI, call it whatever you want to, but it's been doing it a long time.
Long time. And now they just have that hot word to put to it. So they're getting recognized in the news again because they've got that buzzword that everyone's looking for.
I do think that it's legitimate concern about using things like ChatGPT to generate lots of garbage information. I mean, it's one of those things where it's going to be hard to hear the signal for the noise kind of thing. There's going to be so much garbage out there, and it's easier now for people to have an excuse to say, well, obviously that's made up, because it could be made up. And so I do think there's a legitimate concern, but I think that concern's been with social media for a long time. I just think people have ignored it because there's so much money going into it.
Yes.
So
Number 3, social surveillance with
yeah.
AI technology. Same thing. It's been there for a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, what is it? I read once that London is the most has more video cameras per person than any other city in the world. Facial recognition. One of the reasons that I got into AI in the first place was is my interest in computer vision, and a particular personal project that I was working on with my youngest son had to do with surveillance of a different kind. It was my own personal stuff, but people tracking people's movements, things like that. I mean, you can't even go through a store. I think the stores have technology they use to track you based on your
Yes,
phones. They know
they
which
do.
places you stop the
They
most. And
do. You go into, and I'm not going to say names, but you go into like your retail stores, your big retail stores, and it's been going on for a really long
that's what we've
time,
heard.
to where it knows where you're at in the store, and if you stay somewhere long enough,
Get a little
if
pop-up
you
ad,
it'll
maybe.
pop up an ad, or if you leave the store, it's going to pop up reminding you that you can get this online, so
Has
you
that ever
don't have to.
happened to you?
Yes.
Really? That's
and,
never happened.
and like
And,
maybe I'm bathing suit shopping,
mm-hmm.
and then when I get home after I've tried on 100 bathing suits and not liked how any of them looked and left without purchasing,
Yeah, you suddenly get an
I
ad.
get ads and stuff
Oh,
for
I know.
bathing
We've
suits.
all noticed that.
I used to teach that when I taught junior high. We used to
Yeah.
talk about that stuff.
Yeah, I think that um, these large language, I mean, the thing when I look at these large language models, what we're calling AI right now, I think of it, I love the interface, the natural language interface. I love the trainability of it and all that other stuff. But that back end AI that's been around for a long time, it's been being used to track people, like you said, for a good while. Should we be concerned about it getting worse? Well, yeah, but even if they wouldn't have came out with GPT-4, I would still be concerned about that getting worse. Your phone knowing where you are. How do you think Google's Maps knows where the traffic jams are at all times? I love that feature.
It took me on a back road today,
Yeah,
headed back from San Marcos.
yeah.
I went on
Bob's Road.
Bob's Road, and because there was a road that was closed,
And where does
and
that term Bob's Road come
it
from?
comes from the movie
The movie
Twister.
Twister. I don't know where we are. We're on Bob's Road.
But
Yeah,
anyway, number 4, bias due to AI. Now, we talked about this in a previous podcast.
we did.
We'll touch on it again here. Bias is human.
Inherently human. I mean, I know you and I did a training for a group. We had about 40 people in the room, and we talked about bias with AIs and how all that training data, at some point, it got labeled. Now they're talking about using AI to label data for AI training AIs, which sounds like a really bad idea. I don't know why, but it just sounds like a bad idea. But the somebody's got to say that that's a picture of a cat, and it's usually a person that's done that at some point. So when
Yes.
you start labeling things, bias isn't necessarily always a negative bias. It's just I might be biased because I like a particular color more than another. So I may give a more positive view if you ask me for a sentiment analysis on a particular thing. I'm not a huge coffee fan. So if I see a cup of coffee, I'm not going to go, oh, that looks so good. I'm going to go, it's a cup of coffee. But if my daughter or my wife saw a cup of coffee, they might use a lot more adjectives to serve. But the funny thing about bias is, no, it's one of those things everybody says, well, you'll know it when you see it.
Hmm.
Nobody quite see. We asked a teacher who said she taught it in her class, tried to help her kids recognize it. But when I asked her to articulate a definition that I could use to train someone that was training an AI, she gave examples of it, but she couldn't give me a clear definition of it. And I'm not sure. Maybe somebody could post a comment or something and tell me what a really clear, concise definition of bias is. Or maybe I should just look it up in the
Well,
dictionary.
right now it's just something they're saying in the news to get your attention.
It works.
It's going to
It
discriminate.
works.
It's going to be biased. It's going to,
And it
pick
probably will be,
favorites.
but that's because humans are doing it. I
All right.
can't imagine taking the bias out of humans. But
No. Number 5, widening socioeconomic inequality because of AI.
I tend to agree with this one. I agree with the fact that, again, I said earlier, I don't think this is all a blue collar worker problem, but I am a little concerned about some of the people that are going to either lose their jobs, or it's not just losing your job. It's what kind of advantage do you have if you're either A, understand AI, number one, or B, you have the ability to really utilize it. You have the time, you have the resources to create your own personal, chat bot, or maybe, agents where you've got 10 agents that you've sprung out on the world going out and looking for all the best prices on this, that, or the other. Who had A normal person isn't going to have time for that. So again, you could have the gap between the rich and the poor, the chasm, getting wider. And I'm a little concerned. I don't know what to do about that. And that's one of the things that bothers me about a lot of these articles, that this one at least attempted to say what you should do about that. A lot of them don't.
Yeah, but let's think about, people talk about the government coming in and putting regulations and things like that on AI and within businesses. And what about making it to where it's more economical, socioeconomically, it's more economical to have the person working versus
Yeah.
something that's AI.
Well, you and I used to own a business. And we talked about this a lot. We had a restaurant, and it was expensive to have. It was your biggest expense, having employees. And we tried to pay our employees more. That's why we went out of business, probably, because we tried to pay our employees more.
Mm-hmm.
Not really. We just sold the business. But anyway, the idea is that it was difficult for us, we were restaurant owners, to make money, because when we took money out of their paycheck, but we had to match that money to send it to the government. I don't remember what you called that, the Social Security, and all that stuff. And I get why it's there, but at the same time, for small businesses, it's expensive. And
Well, and then
maybe
you want to give them paid vacations. You want to help them with their any health insurance coverage and things like that.
the, so the cost of having employees is very high.
It's very high.
And the government doesn't really spend a lot of time trying to figure out how they may give tax breaks to wealthy people, but businesses, especially small businesses like we were, it was difficult for us to make it. Maybe, like you said, they should spend more time on that than they should spend worrying about whether or not AI is going to do it. But anyway.
Number 6, weakening ethics and goodwill because of AI.
Yeah, that's an interesting term, weakening ethics. I think that we've seen a weakening of ethics, especially you don't have to follow the politics of the United States right now very far to see the weakening of ethics and the goodwill. It seems like people, I don't know if people are getting, I don't think they're getting nastier. I think you read about it more. It's back to those algorithms feeding people what they think they want to hear.
I tend to disagree with you.
I don't know if ethics are getting weaker, or we're just hearing about it more. But
well, to me, it's the goodwill, and I'm going to roll this back into video games. It is difficult. Empathy, maybe empathy is the word that I'm looking for. As a teacher, I started seeing a decline in empathy in students.
There's been a lot of, but that could be social media as much as video games. Well, I mean, there's been a lot of studies that they looked at kids that play video games all the time. I'm not a huge gamer fan, but kids that play video games all the time versus the ones that don't, and they don't see an increase in violence or whatever. I think the social isolation that video games provide, and then you amplify that with social media and, this perfection people see of other people on social media. I think when you combine all of that stuff, you end up with a weakening of goodwill toward other people, or empathy toward other people, just because you don't spend time with other people.
But it's not AI.
Well, I don't know. AI could exacerbate. I'm not sure why AI is going to exacerbate that. I think that, even in this article, they said it's not unique to this particular thing. It's been happening a long time. I agree with that. But I'm not sure what you do about that.
Well,
make a nicer AI. I've heard there's a couple of
nicer AI. There is a movie that is one of your favorite movies, Tomorrowland.
I love that movie.
And one of the things that it talks about in Tomorrowland is feeding the wrong wolf. And I think that that's something that we have been doing as a society for quite some time.
Which wolf survives? The one you feed the most. If you've got if you want people to act a particular way, then that's the behavior you need to encourage. It doesn't seem like that's what's happening nowadays, but I don't want to turn this into an ethics discussion overall. I'm not clear how AI is going to weaken that any more than social media already has.
Well, I'm going to do these a little bit out of order. I'm going to go with number 8 and then come back to number 7.
Yeah, we're not going to spend much time on number 7 because it's just stupid.
Okay, well, we'll get to number 7. So number 8, financial crisis brought about by AI. Now, I think they're talking a lot about the trading.
They are algorithmic trading. That's why if the market swings too much in one direction or another nowadays, they shut down the algorithmic traders immediately.
Didn't this happen in like 2010?
The flash crash. Yeah, I remember that. Of course, I didn't have a lot of money in the market, but I remember the market. I think I read about it. It went crazy because I thought it started with Apple stock, but I can't remember. But basically, the AIs started having this weird bidding war that nobody could figure out exactly why they were doing it, but some algorithm, malfunctioned. And the malfunctioning algorithm problem caused, I 100% agree that that AI can exacerbate that. The financial industry is one of those that really, really needs to be.
Careful.
They've got enough going on with their algorithms and stuff in order, and not don't make it worse by adding more, giving more open-ended access to the markets by AI.
Let's go back to number 7.
Yeah, that was just stupid.
AI powered weapons.
Has anybody seen Terminator? Has anybody seen The Matrix? Has anybody seen War Games? Pick sci-fi writers, which I'm a sci-fi fan, but sci-fi writers and movie writers have been talking about how bad this is. And what do I read today? I hope this is an Onion thing. It was a joke, but I read that the military is experimenting with brain cells on a chip. Does that seem like a good idea? It really doesn't. No. The one thing I like about...
Hopefully that's fake news.
I hope that's fake news. One of the things I like about... I've been reading about what the Europeans versus United States versus China is doing for regulating. And one of the things I like about what they're doing in Europe is they're designating certain areas as just dangerous.
Not going to happen. Not going to happen.
These are places you're just not going to put AI. We don't understand it well enough. We're not going to have an armed robot going around London trying to shoot people that are shoplifting or whatever it is they're afraid of. Basically anything where
high risk.
I think it's a term they use, is high risk. Any high risk area, they're just not allowing AI for now. Weapons design, it seems like a bad place. I know the military's talked about it for a while. We're going to make it where our drones can make their own decisions. I don't want a drone deciding whether or not it should open fire on a human.
No.
Has anybody seen Terminator?
Maybe we should send a few copies of that movie to the White House.
Somebody needs to watch that movie. There's several variations.
Pentagon, here we come. We're going to send copies of the Terminator.
I sometimes think they're using it as a tool to figure out what to do next, and not as a warning as to what they shouldn't do. That's kind of worries me a little bit.
So the last part of the podcast, we're going to talk about ways to mitigate.
Oh, we're running out of time, aren't we? We better
ways to mitigate the risk of artificial intelligence.
I won't go through all of them individually, but you're talking about the regulations. I'm not a big fan of it. There's always been a joke that I've always heard since I was a kid: "We're the government. We're here to help you." I don't think the government can regulate this kind of thing in a way that makes any sense to anybody. They're probably just going to mess it up.
Well, not just that, but the government tends to regulate for the people who are the biggest lobbyists or who have the biggest voices.
The Amazons, the Microsofts, they've got the money, they've got the AI, they're going to be able to do a lot with it. I think creating I'm a big fan of standards, education and open standards. Those are the two things that I believe that have the best chance of helping. There should be more transparency. The government's saying that you've got to get your AI inspected before you release it, and the government's going to be the one that inspects it. Give me a break.
Yeah.
I think the open standards, I think letting people see, I think that's the only way we're going to have a chance of doing this right. And because, and education, like I said, I'm a big believer, and that's why we go out and talk to school districts. We've got lots more. We're going to be doing a lot more educating over the next few months with schools. I think it's a really good idea to teach people not just what it is, but how to use it. I'm a believer in AI is a good thing. I don't think it's going to end the world. I don't think it's going to end civilization. I think it could, but I think bad social media could too. I think that we have so many problems that it can help us with. We have a disgraceful lack of care for our elderly. We have an educational system needs help. We have medical breakthroughs it could help with. I think these are all things that AI could help with. I think it's worth the risk with the rights open standards to drive it.
I agree. That's all the time we have for this podcast. We hope you guys listen next week when we do AI in action. I am Maurie, and this is Jim. Aren't you, Jim?
I am. Have a good night.
Have a good night. And that brings us to the end of AI in Action, exploring tomorrow's tech today. We're Maurie and Jim, your guides on this exciting journey through the world of artificial intelligence. We hope today's conversation has left you with fresh insights and a deeper understanding of how AI is shaping our future. If you enjoyed our discussion and want to stay up to date with the latest in AI, make sure to subscribe and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. Remember, the future is not something that just happens to us. It's something we can actively shape and influence with knowledge and action. So let's continue exploring, innovating, and taking action. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to sharing more exciting AI developments with you next time on AI in Action, exploring tomorrow's tech today.